Thank you all very much for coming to the February meeting for the local Alcohol and Drug Planning Committee. It is 73 degrees outside and sunny, tricking us all into thinking that spring has arrived, but you're showing some dedication by being indoors here today, and I'm appreciative. So, our community corrections presentation, I know that one of the things that I kind of run into is that I look at all of recovery through the lens of the criminal justice system, which is not fair, and it's not necessarily helpful. But sometimes it is, and sometimes it is a big piece as to how people enter recovery and change their lives. It is one of those primary entry points, and when you look at a lot of our treatment providers locally, they'll identify the number of folks they have that are coming from the criminal justice system who are using this opportunity to do something differently. With that said, we have a lot of other behavioral health elements to the work we do within community corrections, and we are lucky enough in our department to have a manager, Tira Hubbard, that is recently spoke at the national conference in terms of how those changes have looked. So I learn something every time she talks, not to build it up too much, but I think we're really lucky. So please welcome Tira Hubbard.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here today. I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation. I want to take a little bit of a light approach initially because I think people are relational. So I think when we can relate concepts to human beings and to our own experiences, they sink in better and they mean more to us. So I'm going to take a light approach initially, and then I'm going to kind of wrap it in with some evidence and then open it up for questions and conversation to make sure that people leave here with a really good understanding. The first thing I want to note, though, is this is not my concept. This is actually, this is a concept that was put forth in this article in the Federal Probation Journal. And I brought a few copies and also cards with my email address on them, because if you're not a paper person and you prefer it electronically, I can email it to you. So if this is something you'd like to have a copy of, this is where this idea came from. So the idea is, the role of a probation officer or parole officer is changing. We follow the evidence. So much like the medical profession and science, there is evidence behind the work that we do. What we're doing is we're following the evidence because our primary goal is to reduce recidivism, stop crimes from happening. That makes our communities better. It makes the individuals we're serving better. It improves their lives. It improves their families. But our goal is really to reduce recidivism. So the best way to do that is follow the research, look at the evidence, and develop programs and partnerships that support that. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So a few years back, I was working as a community justice officer out at the transition center, so doing a lot of case management work. Before that, I was a victims advocate. So for 13 years, I worked as a domestic violence and sexual assault victims advocate in the military, in nonprofits, in our community locally. And I got really tired of working with victims. I was tired of working with women. I was tired of working with victims. I was tired of feeling like I didn't have power in the system. And so I thought, I should become a probation officer. And I wanted to put DV offenders in jail. Like, that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted justice in the world. So they sent me to the academy where you learn to wrestle and tussle with your peers. And while I was learning how to wrestle, after years of a victims advocate, I'm at the academy learning how to wrestle. As I'm learning how to wrestle, one of the POs that I'm wrestling with is talking to me about her hobbies, and she plays roller derby. And I was like, I like to skate, and wrestling's kind of fun. And so I decided to come back from the academy and take up roller derby as a hobby, which is not a natural transition for a victims advocate. Anybody seen roller derby in the room? Few. Old school derby, new school derby. There's also renegade derby, like that's where you get to throw elbows. So it's a little bit of like a violent sport. So I started playing roller derby, and I had a lot of fun. But it's a little bit of a violent sport. So I kept sustaining injuries and was realizing this could limit my career because you can get really injured playing this game. And if you get really injured, you can't work as a PO. So I thought I need to make a transition in this role as a roller derby player. By the name, my name was Swerve and Protect, and my number was 911. I had a helmet painted like an MPD cop car. I was all in. So when I couldn't play the game anymore, I thought, I want to stay involved. These are women that I've met that are a part of my life. I've connected with them. These are school teachers. These are medical professionals. These are women in law enforcement, women in leadership, and we have this amazing relationship based on this sort of violent sport on skates. So I wanted to stay involved. So I thought, what seems natural? I'll become a ref, because the referees only get knocked to the ground sometimes. And so it would be less dangerous and less career-ending. So I started playing as a referee. And what I realized a few months in reffing in this sport was that it felt just like work. It felt just like work. My whole job was to skate around that track and put people in jail. So I was constantly sending my friends and other teammates to the box, looking for penalties, looking for reasons that they were messing up, trying to enforce the rules of the game, and sending them to the box. And that was what my hobby was, and it felt a lot like what I was doing 40 hours a week. So I was like, this is not meeting my need for a hobby. So I thought I'd become a coach instead. So I started line coaching, which was a really different experience because you're still on skates, like you're still showing up to every game, you're working with your team all week long during practice. At the team, you're giving them signals, you're telling them what to do, you're saying, call the jam, like you're telling them what to do, you're right there with them, you're coaching them. After the game, if you lose, you're there with them. If there was a loss, you're going back to the locker room and you're talking about how you failed forward. What could you have done better? How does the team learn and grow from this? You're also celebrating wins. So you're going to the after event together. You're hugging each other. You're celebrating with their families. You're looking at and you're still looking at how could we be better next time? Like we only won by 30 points. How do we win by 90 points next time? And I realized that felt really different from what I did at work, which made me start looking at what I do at work. When I ran across this article, which talks about the changing identity of probation, and the idea that historically we have been seen as referees. Now, I use the roller derby analogy because it is the only sport I know anything about. If I tried to talk to you about baseball or football, I would completely embarrass myself. So I only know how to talk about roller derby, so it's the sport that you get the analogy from. But what we learned is that we have historically been referees. So this is where I'm going to get a little bit of audience participation. You have had interactions with the same clients that we serve, right? What are some things that fit within the role of probation that fall under refereeing? What do referees do? I'm going to make you all talk.
Call fouls.
They call fouls. So from the world of probation, what might a foul be? What might a foul be?
You did something you shouldn't.
Did something you shouldn't. You violated a no contact, right? Especially with my DV lens, right? You violated a no contact. Is that something that we need a referee for? Right? Referees serve a purpose.
Yes.
We can't have a game without a ref. In roller derby, there are games without refs. It's called Renegade Derby, and it is bloody because there's nobody really calling the shots. So you can throw elbows and trip people, and it can get really... I never played Renegade Derby because I value my spine. So we need refs for the game to be played fair and for people to stay safe. So in the world of probation, we need refs for the game to be played fair, to make sure that all the participants can be safe, and that we can get through the game, look at our losses, look at our wins, but we have coaches to help with that. What are some other things that might fall under refereeing as probation? Like, what do you see in the movies that POs do? What are things that we do?
You're attempting to modify behavior.
We're attempting to modify behavior. And how might, from a referee lens, how might we be doing that?
Well, you're sharing experience or stories about how other people may have modified behavior.
Okay. So with some education and sometimes some interventions, sometimes those are educational and sometimes those are more punishment based, right?
And consequences for aberrant behavior.
There you go. And some consequences, because that's part of what the refs do. So that's part of what I did in roller derby as a ref, was I sent people to the penalty box. Like, you've committed a penalty. Now you need to go have a timeout. Think about your behavior, right? Kind of like parenting a little bit. Like, now go think about your behavior, okay? What about drug use? From a referee standpoint, how does drug use kind of play into that? For reffing, what are some things we might do to catch drug use?
You look for things out of place.
Out of place. So maybe in a home visit, right? We're looking for, like, what doesn't look right here? Like, is there a bong in the living room? Like, is everything really messy? What are we seeing during the home visit? We also might conduct UAs, right? So we're trying to catch drug use through the concept of taking UAs. We're also looking at it from a victim and a community safety perspective. Conducting home visits, where we're going to a home visit to look inside the home to make sure that victims are safe, to make sure that our clients who shouldn't have weapons don't have weapons, right? We're doing what we can. We're responding to violations that put the community at risk. So if there's a lot of shoplifting, if there's a lot of trespassing, if there's new burglaries or stealing cars, we're responding to that to interrupt that behavior and to create safety for the community. So historically, POs have done a lot of reffing. That's why I didn't enjoy it so much as a hobby, was because I was doing a lot of reffing all week at work. I was looking for violations, collecting UAs, applying consequences, looking for safety in the community. All of those things are things that we do. Those are things that we're mandated by law to do. Those are the things that keep our community safe. But they're not effective. They can interrupt behavior, but when we follow the science and the evidence, that is not how we actually create behavior change. So some of the ways that we create behavior change, I don't know that I have that one. So some of the ways that we create behavior change is looking at criminogenic factors. So much like a coach working with the players, you have to figure out what are they bringing to the game. So from the roller derby position, we would have players come in to attend fresh meet. We call it fresh meet. That's your brand new players. Those are your players that are kind of like wobbly on their skates and their knee pads don't fit quite right and they fall down a lot. But what we're looking for is, although they may not come to the game knowing how to play roller derby, do they know how to skate? Do they know how to fall? Can they fall safely? We need to be able to do an assessment to figure out what they bring to us and what the risks are. Because if you have someone in roller derby that falls big and their arms and legs go everywhere, they create risk to themselves and risk to the other players. So we need to do assessments through fresh meet training to figure out what skills do they bring and what risks do they pose. In the world of probation, we do something really similar. We complete risk assessments. So for the men that we supervise, we complete something that's the level of service and case management inventory. It's called the LSCMI. And that's where we assess their risks and skills that they're kind of bringing to the table, that they're bringing into the game. For women, we conduct something that's called the Women's Risk Need Assessment. The Women's Risk Need Assessment is looking at a different set of needs. Now, when we look at men and women, and some of those risk factors, what do you think, let's pause it here, what do you think creates crime? Why do people commit crime? From your basis and from your understanding, whether it be from community or from a treatment perspective, why do people commit crime?
That's how they've learned to get their needs met.
That's how they get their needs met. What kinds of needs? Addiction, okay.
Things, food.
Food, so some of the thefts and things like that. What about some of our more sinister crimes, like sex offenses or domestic violence or assaults? Why do people commit those?
Mental health.
What was that?
Mental health.
Mental health?
Power
Power and
and control.
control.
I
What was that?
wasn't comfortable with the mental health piece.
Okay, I get that. We'll talk more about it. We'll cycle back to it. Okay. Trauma, right?
Peer approval.
Peer approval. Okay, Jack here is starting to take us down a different path. And I'm going to acknowledge that and praise that, because what you just threw out there was a criminogenic need. All the things that came before that, minus the power, were more about humanitarian needs. So mental health, food, even some addiction basis are more about humanitarian needs. These are needs that we have as people, but they are not necessarily needs that drive criminality. So when we look at what drives criminality, there are 8 factors that drive criminality for our male clients. Our males make up about 70 to 75% of our clients. The needs that drive those are broken down. Substance abuse is one of them. That's where a lot of you come into play. The top 4 needs that drive criminality are criminal history. So criminal history isn't something we can change. So we as POs, we don't spend a lot of time coaching around criminal history because we can't really change it. It is what it is. We try to keep it from getting worse because we don't want new crimes committed, but we don't spend a lot of time around criminal history. The next one is what people think. So we call that pro-criminal attitudes, beliefs, and values. So that's where power and control come in. What thoughts and beliefs do they have about behavior that allow justification and behaviors to occur? So what they think and believe. The second one is how they think. That one is called antisocial patterns. That's things like risk-taking, thrill-seeking, impulse control, not being able to slow down the decision-making process. This is where mental health gets noted a lot, right? Because we see risk-taking, thrill-seeking, impulse control, and then we try to put that into a category. It's not that. It's something different. It's the how people think. Part of what POs do now as coaches is we have to look at what people think and believe and how they think and believe. So if you believe that it's okay to take someone's car without permission, and you don't know how to slow yourself down, and you go with impulses, and you also like thrills and risk, we're going to have a car thief, right? We're going to have somebody who's going to take cars because the belief system and the thoughts and how they think don't allow for interruption in that behavior. Now you add the third one, which is the one that Jack brought up, and that's about peers. So if your peers have a similar belief system and they also have some antisocial patterns, which is they have a hard time slowing themselves down, risk-taking, thrill-seeking, they're going to be encouraging you to take cars, right? So this is the mess of criminogenic needs, the top 4, which is where we target most of our time in coaching. It's also where we spend some time refereeing because we have to target those needs. Now, what the science, the evidence, and the research tells us is there are 4 other needs. This is where we get into a few more of the others. Substance abuse, family marital, pro-social leisure, and education employment. Because these are things that are important to people. If someone isn't working, they don't have their financial needs met, they have a family that supports criminality, they don't have any pro-social leisure time, they're not part of a bowling league that's full of like community members that support them in working and doing pro-social things, they have more free time, they spend more time with antisocial companions, right? We get this loop that just kind of keeps happening. What we know is those top 4, we get double points for working on those. So what that means is if we can target one of those top 4, and I say top 4, but really criminal history, there's nothing we can do with that. So if we target those top 3, we are going to be twice as effective in reducing criminality than if we target the bottom 4. So we train POs to coach around those 3 things: what people think, how they think, and who they hang out with. That's where we have to spend our energy. So we have adopted all kinds of different skills, interventions, and partnerships with community agencies to be able to help us coach. So office visits, when I first started, I'd have a client come in and I would pull out the conditions and I'd be like, did you go to group? Have you peed in a cup? You didn't answer your door when I came for a home visit. You didn't report on time, right? Like going through this list of conditions, looking for violations, signaling those violations, and then potentially putting someone in the penalty box, sending them to jail, to the transition center, increasing their reporting. Because that's the model that we were trying to use. When we really started looking at the evidence, what we saw is that if we change that up, so we still track those conditions. We are still referees. We still need to keep our community safe. So we still do those things. But in addition now, when clients come in for an office visit, what's your goal? What's the problem you're facing? What barriers do you experience? What strengths do you have? And what is your top criminogenic risk? Because that's what we want to figure out. What is the thing that is driving the behavior? What is driving that risk? Because if we can target that thing, if it's the companions, if it's what they think, if it's how they think, and we can teach new skills, simply coach them, show them a different way to play and win the game, then we can celebrate with them. So we do a lot of education and interventions as probation officers now. We're teaching coping skills, we're teaching grounding skills, we're teaching behavior chains, that thoughts and feelings lead to behaviors that have consequences, either positive consequences or negative consequences. But we spend a lot of time teaching these things. We also focus on celebration. So much like as a coach, after you've won a game, you want to celebrate with your team. As probation officers, we need to be able to celebrate successes. So we've added in things like positive reinforcements, where we make a really big deal about people changing those criminogenic factors. So instead of saying like, I would like to reward you for attending treatment, we don't do that. What I want to do is what I want to say is I want to reinforce that when you went to treatment, you helped someone else in the room who was feeling cornered by a peer associate, right? You went over and interrupted that because we're trying to draw those positive reinforcements back into the behaviors that we're trying to change. How many parents in the room? You've parented. Okay. How did your kids do if you applied consequences? Did they immediately change behavior and you never had to apply the consequence again? I hear some chuckles. You must have had a child like me. So my son is 24. He's one of those that you do something wrong, send him to his room, put him in timeout, apply the consequence, right? And then expect a behavior change. What that would result in is increased naughty behavior. Because then there'd be screaming and like fit throwing in the room. And so then he didn't put away his toys, but now I'm having to get after him about like raising his voice and throwing things and right, like the behavior kind of escalates. That never really worked for him. Applying consequences, necessary part of parenting, right? I think we can all agree that we have to apply consequences. But you also have to kind of fine tune them for your child. Because if something doesn't work and you keep doing it, you're increasing the naughty behavior, right? So I had to give like times, like you're on timeout for this long, for this reason. If you do these things, this is the positive reinforcement you get. If you do these things, these are negative reinforcements you get, right? And there were charts in the house and like, he had to know because he was able to weigh it out. Like, well, if I do this, I'm only gonna get a 10-minute timeout. I can do 10 minutes. Like, it's worth taking the cookie for 10 minutes, right? We're doing the same thing with ourselves, with our clients. We weigh out our choices. When your how you think is go, 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 you can't slow down enough to weigh those things out. So the concept of applying a consequence, right, that deterrence theory, if the consequence is big enough, they won't commit the crime, doesn't work. If the how you think is a go, 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 right? Because that's not weighing in. When you fuel that go, 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 you fuel that with substances, there isn't a consequence that you can apply that's gonna slow that down. You've got to work on slowing down the go, 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 and the thoughts and the beliefs that lead to the go, go, go. So with 75% of our population, our male clients, those are the three things that we spend a lot of time coaching on and focusing on. We still do UAs, we still do home visits, we still take people to jail, We want to keep this community safe. We want the clients that we serve to be the healthiest whole people that they can. But we have to target those 3 things to get twice the amount done. So that's where we end up partnering with treatment, is we have a set of skills as a coach that's around criminality, right? That's where our expertise is. We are criminologists. We focus on that criminality, that reduction of recidivism. We don't want new crimes. We partner with all of you because you're experts in substance abuse. You're experts in mental health. You're experts in cognitive behavioral needs. You're experts in medical needs. So we partner with you to help us coach this person to be the best player so that we can have those successes. That's really different than it was 10, 11 years ago. We're really different. When you see us out in the field, we've got these we look battle ready, like our vest, and we've got all the things hanging off of us and the badge, and we're not wearing things like this. But we look like we're ready for a fight. We look like we're ready to ref something. We look like we're ready because we are ready to do those things, and we do those things, and we can do those things because our community needs us to do those things. But that's not where we're going to be most effective. When it comes to our female clients, they have a different set of criminogenic needs. Because, as it turns out, men and women are different. Any of you in the room agree with that? Right? So the criminal justice system has figured out in Oregon, and is slowly starting to figure it out nationally, that men and women clients have different needs. So they have some different humanitarian needs, but they have some different criminal risks. So what we've been doing for a long time is treating women the same as we treat men. We send them to the same treatment, we apply the same consequences, we ref them in the same way. What we've found is, through following the evidence and the science again, is that women commit crimes for different reasons than do men. How they think, their go, go, go button is not the same as a man's go, go, go button. They're socialized differently. They have different motivations, and they have a different pathway into the criminal justice system. For our women, mental health is a criminogenic factor because oftentimes their pathway includes self-medicating following abuse and trauma, and oftentimes some sort of a mental health need, which then fuels their substance use, which keeps them with folks that are unsafe in their life, which sort of drives their criminality a little bit more. So for women, instead of men, we focus on relationships. That's a really big factor for them. Substance abuse, mental health, economics. Those are the things that we would think would be the same for both genders. But when we really look at the research and the evidence, it's not there. It's different. So we have to change to keep up with the research because we want to be the best that we can at what we do, and we want to keep our community safe and our clients healthy and whole. We want to work well with our community partners. To best do that, we have to be both refs and coaches. So when I started out, we used to have this idea that we wear 2 different hats as a PO. It's like, oh, that's my law enforcement hat. That's when I have on my badge and my vest. That's my social worker hat. That's when I'm at my desk and I'm doing some sort of paper intervention or homework. The reality is we wear both of those hats all the time. We never take one off and put the other one on. So when we're being a ref and we are applying a consequence, we have to do that within the context of a coaching model, which means I am putting you in jail because this is what you did. This is why I'm trying to interrupt that behavior. This was the cost to the community, the cost to your family, the cost to you. And this is why, this is the criminogenic risk that we're going to target to change what you were thinking or how you were thinking or who you were hanging out with, to change that pathway so that I don't have to put you in jail again, so that we can redirect that. So just putting someone in jail without that follow-up, without the referrals to your agencies to address those other humanitarian needs, we're not as effective. So that's how we work together and how we need all of you. So I I want to be able to have conversation and open it up for questions. Because for some of you, this is, I mean, Jack was like, peer associates, I've got this. Like, he had it. Some of you, this may be a little bit of a newer concept, right? Like, you have an idea, especially when we look at POs in the media. If you've ever seen a PO in a movie, they're usually like some sluggish, like, white guy who like doesn't really want to do his job and like huffs and puffs up the stairs a little bit and like is never effective. Like every time I see a probation officer in the media, we always like have this one idea that we just don't really care about people or we don't really do a good job. So when we look at socially how we get projected into the media and then where we've been historically, what we're doing now feels really different to people and they're not quite sure what to do with it. So from your perspectives, this is a chance to be able to ask about any questions about probation, coaching, criminogenic risks. What questions do you have? What do you need to know? I know you were like, yeah.
Well, I'll toss a softball. What are some of the, parole and probation, like all of our disciplines, is kind of steeped in history. What is some of the resistance around this newer approach been? Like, what are some of the things people throw out? Like, I'm not going to do that because of this. Have you heard? I mean, I'm sure you've heard most of them.
I've heard most of them. From different perspectives, right? So from the PO perspective, because I'll speak from that perspective first. Like, I didn't get into this because I wanted to be a social worker. Like, I got into this because I wanted to be law enforcement, but I wanted to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I didn't want to do patrol work, right? So there's the PO perspective. Like, you're asking me to do a completely different job than I signed up for. From the community perspective, from the family members, they love this person. They see this person wrecking their life. They're getting charges. The family wants them in jail. They want them in jail. They want them in jail because when they're in jail, they know where they are. They know that they're safe. They know that they're getting fed. That they know that they have access to a shower. They know that they don't have to worry about them that night or the next night. So we had a lot of family members that are like, lock them up and throw away the key. That's not because they don't love that person. It's because they worry about that person. They want to know that they're safe. From a financial standpoint, jail and prison is way more expensive than probation. From a research standpoint, it's way less effective. Cognitive behavioral interventions using a coaching model is how we can reduce recidivism by 30%. That saves our community and our state so much money. We've had a couple pilot projects. One of them, FSAP, Family Sentencing Alternative Project, a statewide project with 5 counties, and it's all about diverting parents from prison. So people that are parents who could have went to prison, we're putting them on probation in the community and we're coaching them. We're coaching them on cognitive behavioral, how they think, how they parent, what their needs are. We're also addressing humanitarian needs. And we have only had, I think Jackson County, out of like 30 some, we've only had one that did not have a successful ending. Those are astronomically successful odds in any kind of a pilot project. And it's taking all of these little things and putting them together and applying them. From the client perspective, guess what? When they're not being treated like you have to check the boxes and you need to pee in a cup, and I'm going to put you in jail if you do this again, they start reporting. When we're talking about what goals do you have? What's important to you? Why do you use? What benefits does your use give you? What consequences does your use give you? How would you like to have done that differently? How did what you did impact someone? Let me show you another skill to help you in that same situation. They start feeling like we care and that we're invested, and they start reporting. So I was one of the first POs in the office to really start rolling this stuff out. So we started a women's caseload, and then what we did is we took all of the women in the office that nobody else really liked to work with and were really difficult, and we put them on my caseload. So I had like 80, 90 some of our office's women that nobody else really wanted to work with, all on one caseload. I spent a couple of months just like pulling my hair out because there's reasons that nobody wanted to work with them. They had a lot of needs. They were difficult. When we started applying these concepts, guess what happened? They all started reporting all the time. They started showing up on time for office visits, bringing their family and their friends and encouraging other clients to report. We started providing some humanitarian needs while we're addressing the criminogenic needs, because I never want to downplay humanitarian needs, right? That's not our job. That's not what we focus on, but it's what's important to people. So we started addressing some humanitarian needs by providing some hygiene supplies. For the women, we started getting donations and giving them some makeup. What happened when I started doing that? I started getting less and less after-hour calls from law enforcement about my women stealing. They stopped stealing because they didn't need to, because we were having conversations about stealing. We were having conversations about the thinking that drives the stealing and looking for other ways to meet those humanitarian needs. So the clients like it. They like being able to come in and talk about, I don't have to UA people all that much anymore, because they come in and they say, I used. I haven't even told my treatment provider yet. I wanted to tell you first, because this is what happened. And what do we do with that? Immediately, what led up to the use? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Who were you with? What could we have done differently? How do we look at that game, that play in the game, and change up the dynamics so that you can run a different play next time? So they're reporting now, which means for us as a department, we have more people showing up, lots more people. So our caseloads are big. So any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a certain mix of criminogenic and humanitarian needs or behaviors that is most difficult to rehabilitate? Do you find certain mixes tough to?
I think some of them are going to be in line with our domestic violence and our sex offenders, because of the thinking and the how they think, combined with the family marital issues, combined with economic issues, sometimes combined with lower cognition. That's a really hard combination. When you have somebody who has lower cognitive abilities and also has that, like, how they think is a go, 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 so you have that impulse control combined with lower cognitive abilities, we can't treat cognitive abilities, right? Like, that's not our specialty. So we have to partner to try and get that humanitarian need met while we focus on the go, 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 and some of that impulse control. So that's a really hard combination. Sometimes severe mental health issues combined with substance use, combined with antisocial companions, peers that are encouraging naughty behavior, right? Like, that's also a really hard combination, because what do you treat first, right? We need to really be focusing on peers, but that may be a more vulnerable client who doesn't have a support system that's pro-social. And because of mental health needs, because of health needs, because of all of these other needs, we have to figure out what do you treat first, chicken or the egg kind of thing. Like, and it sort of depends on what the client is interested in working on. Because wherever we can get an in, sometimes we take a humanitarian in to start working with a community partner to address that, so that we can create some rapport there, we can create some safety, we can decrease some vulnerability to start addressing the things that are criminogenic in nature. So there was a couple more hands. Yeah.
Yeah, I have several, but I don't want to monopolize. So this is along the same line as the last question. You did that. You talked about your initial risk assessment.
Yes.
So is that when you do an initial risk assessment, are there categories? I mean, is there a category where you'd say, well, we're going to concentrate on this person because they have a better cognitive ability to be able to go along, or is it stratified in some way? And then and the second part of that is what do you do with inter-rater reliability? I mean, if somebody, all of us are different in our assessment processes and needs and abilities. So what do you do with that?
Okay. So first one is, depending on the risk tool for men and women, I'm going to talk about men because that's the majority of our population. So for men, the assessment that we do with them, it ranks those 8 categories. It ranks them and lets us know on this graph if that's a low risk, a medium risk, or a high risk in that particular domain. So is their antisocial pattern a low risk or is it a high risk? So we train POs to target the ones that are the highest risk, but to focus on those top 3 because we know they're worth double points. So if you have all 3 of those present, choose the one that's the highest risk because that's where we get the most bang for our buck. Now, sometimes if someone has pro-criminal thoughts, values, and beliefs, and if you say to that client, I'd like to target your thoughts, values, and beliefs because they're criminal in nature, they're not very receptive to that. They're just not, they're like, no, I'll talk about getting a job, right? So sometimes we have to take a different, so let's talk about why you don't have a job. Could it be your thoughts, values, and beliefs that keep you from employment, right? So we get tricky, where we can target the real domain, but sometimes under a different sort of umbrella because we want to be collaborative and we want them to be involved in it and we don't want to turn them off to it. So that's how we choose, based on the science, but also on the person. Inter-rater reliability. So there's a couple ways that we do inter-rater reliability. One of them is that as a state, we test the POs yearly to make sure that they are doing the assessments the way in which they were designed, because they're validated if you do them the right way. If you start to drift from how you're supposed to conduct an assessment, they are less valid. So we test our POs and we make them watch videos and answer questions. And then if they don't score well, they have to go back and do a little refresher because we all start to drift and get complacent when we get used to doing something, right? With our clients, a lot of the assessment is self-report, but we have the ability to override with documentation. So it removes PO gut. So I can't just be like, well, my gut tells me that they're lying to me, right? I have to dig into it, and I can't, because my gut isn't better than the science. So we have manuals, they have to follow them, they have to use really good motivational interviewing to get the information. It's also the way in which we talk about the assessments. So there's 2 ways to approach doing assessments. So you're gonna have to come in and I'm gonna have to complete this risk assessment on you, which is gonna tell me if you're gonna commit more crimes or not. But mostly it's gonna tell me how many times you need to report to me and how many times I'm gonna do a home visit and how long you're gonna be on supervision, right? That's one way. That's all true because that does drive those things. What we train POs instead is I'm gonna complete a guided interview with you that's gonna help me get to know you, your needs, your risks, and together we're gonna use that to build a plan to help you reach your goals, right? Same thing, how you present it, totally different. And I think there was another question over here somewhere. Did I see another hand? I mean, if not, we're pretty much at the time. So.
I got more.
Oh, you have? Well, I'll give you one more.
Well, this is actually, I get a chance to go around the country and do some of this stuff through surveys. And you're right, a lot of places aren't there yet intellectually with this notion. And I'm just wondering if percentages of folks you may have lost who aren't at this place yet of acceptance, and kind of what you know about the national movement. Are there other states that are in the same place, or?
So I'd like to brag about Oregon for a minute. I think it always feels good to brag about Oregon. So there's a couple things that I want to brag about Oregon. One, I went to the Association for Justice Involved Females in Organizations. It's a national conference that's held every 2 years. It was held in Georgia, and I was one of the presenters there. So I went to that conference, and it was hosted by Georgia and Alabama. They've had some big lawsuits, they've lost some big money, and they're trying to make some big changes. And so what they did in every single workshop and every single conference, they were like, is there anyone from Oregon in the room? We'd like to hear what Oregon is doing. So I spent most of the time in the conference. There was one that I was presenting, but all the other workshops, I ended up speaking on behalf of Oregon over and over and over again. They were so excited about all of the things that they're hearing that Oregon is doing that they approached us and asked if Oregon would be willing to host the next conference, because we are really taking a lead nationally in the work we're doing as a state. I then went to the American Parole and Probation Association National Conference. Same thing again. What are you all doing in Oregon? We've been hearing really good things from Oregon. all the way up to and including the FSAP pilot project that I mentioned, the feds are looking at trying to copy what Oregon's doing and are pulling together a task force to sort of look at that, and are reaching out to Oregon to find out what we're doing that's so successful and how are we doing it. So just anytime I can just brag about Oregon.
So last question, do you have a percentage that we could throw out there to say, just based on your studies of recent 2 years, you mentioned 30% reduction? Was that for men or women or both? Or?
That's following evidence-based cognitive behavioral interventions. So this concept of coaching applied with moving away from just the consequence-driven, but to the coaching education can reduce recidivism by 30%. So that's
based on hard data.
Based on hard data. There are multiple meta-analysis studies. There is a wealth of research supporting it. There's a lot of gender-neutral research because we've been looking at this, what works, since the 70s, and so there's a wealth of information out there. In the last probably decade, we've really been starting to look at women and their criminogenic needs and what drives that. There is almost as much data about women at this point as there has been about men, because you get a bunch of women together and science and they're like, oh, we'll show them. So that's been happening. We've got a ton of data, and yet it's very new data. And so it's pretty exciting what we're being able to pull in. Yeah. Well,
Is it, excuse me, are there any similar models or the same models being used in jails and in prisons? Because it sounds like the great work that you're doing could get easily undone if the person goes back to a typical jail or prison environment.
So some of the things that, one of the reasons we are getting a lot of national attention is because of the work that Oregon has done between the community and the institution. So some of the things that we've partnered really well with the institution is we use the same risk assessments. So we're using the same language, we're using the same case plans, we're using the same SMART goals, we're using the same cognitive behavioral interventions, and we're speaking the same language. So if someone starts on probation, they get revoked, they get sent to prison, the work continues. They actually see the case plan we were working on and can keep it moving forward from the prison setting. Vice versa. If they get sentenced to prison, we get access to their assessment from prison, their case plan from prison, their interventions from prison, and when they're released, we pick it up and keep going. And that's unique. Most states don't have that kind of partnership to the degree that we have worked together with the Department of Corrections IT to write the code ourselves, to put the assessments into our system that is available to both the institution and the community. We sit on the same case management networks. We work collaboratively. We do trainings together, and that's super unique for a state to do that, and it's pretty exciting. So, and I think it's helped us. Develop our relationship with our prison peers so much over the last few years. So, I think we had one more, and then I think we're out of time. Yeah.
So I really appreciate the evidence kind of driving in this direction. One thing that kind of intrigues me is that was there an arm of MAT involved with this at all, where you had the therapy by itself and the therapy with MAT support?
So absolutely. Our department and me and my caseload and our POs are very supportive of MAT, because I think especially when we look at women, which is where my expertise has been over the last few years, women oftentimes it's the same as an abusive relationship. When we approach a victim in domestic violence, because this is where I kind of came from. We approach a woman who's in an abusive relationship and we tell her, you need to leave him, he's no good for you. Why do you put up with that? You need to get out. What we've learned from that is that increases her risk, right? So we have to empower her, we have to provide her with resources. When we look at people in their relationship with heroin, it's oftentimes much like an abusive relationship. So old school referee model, you need to leave that heroin, you need to stop using, it's bad for you, right? And if you don't stop using, I'm gonna put you in jail. What happens when we put them in jail? Withdrawal, detox, what does that do? Increases their risk of overdose upon release. It also increases criminality, because they've been without, they're sick, they need to find the funds to get well. So the combination of applying this model with medication, working with providers, working with treatment is how we reduce the recidivism, because we decrease that crime, right? Because they're not having to go find money, steal to get money. We reduce that crime. We treat them from a medical position. We treat them from a criminality position. We treat them from a treatment, from the cognitive behavioral. It's how we're the most effective. It was not easy for POs to right? It used to be the old model, that's just replacing one drug for another. That's what we thought, 10, 15 years ago. Now we get it. We've been educated and we're really supportive because we see that it's what's effective for people. It's how we create lasting change. So I think that concludes our time. So thank you all. I'll leave my cards. You're welcome to send me an email if you have any questions or if you want this, and I'll give you a paper copy, but then if you want to email me, I can send it to you electronically as well. So thank you. Please feel free to follow up with me if you have any other questions that I didn't get to answer today.
All right, our next section on the agenda is Jackson County updates, leading off with Dr. Mann. Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot new to report, honestly, than from last month, so we're still plugging away.
I'm gonna let you off the hook on that one. Tanya, is Tanya here today? Phillips? All right, Dr. Shames, anything to?
I think I'll take advantage of the fact that there's so many people representing so many different organizations to just suggest that as this COVID-19, this coronavirus, perhaps is going to be something that we're all going to have to deal with, that maybe you should look at your organizations and think about how you could conceivably do your work differently if you had to work in the context of social distancing. A meeting like this, everybody's 2 feet away from each other. In the context of a contagious, serious illness, we wouldn't meet this way. And I think we're beginning to start shifting in terms of how we want to see the community respond. So I'm just kind of putting a seed out there for people to start, as you have your various meetings, just ask those questions of, what would it look like if we didn't meet in person? Could we telecommute? What would your own personal life be like if your kids weren't in school? How would you take care of basic needs? How would you take care of each other if you were sick at home? So that's all. More to come later, perhaps.
Perhaps. It sounds like it. All right. Thanks, Dr. Shames. All right. Local provider updates, leading off with the ARC.
Thank you. We started providing services in the jail last Monday, so we're excited about that. We have MTM Consulting in right now that's doing a gap analysis to look at access to treatment services, and we're anxious to get those results week after next. Also, we have our annual fundraiser luncheon coming up on Thursday, April 16th at Inn at the Commons. Save the date cards went out. Invitations will be going out shortly. And our keynote speaker is Sheriff Nathan Sickler.
Yeah, he's a good speaker. Good. All right. Thanks, Lori. Jody, Allied.
We're still working on patient-centered focus and still kind of remodeling, making it look nicer.
And we're all getting an invite once the remodel's done?
Once it's done, yes.
Okay.
Everybody's getting an invite for sure.
All right.
Laura's were delayed a little. Yeah.
Oh,
Just a little bit.
okay. That happens. All right. Copia, Cynthia?
Not really a lot new to update. We have a wonderful new clinician that joined the team that is EMDR trained and also specializes in LGBTQ issues. And she's a master's level expressive arts therapist, so that's really exciting for us. And I think that's it for us right now.
All right, I don't see Julie or thank you for that. And I don't see Julie or David here from Max's Mission. However, they have been providing services through the Resource Center, and I think they said 8 or 9 saves already since they've been there, in terms of people coming back and reporting that they used the naloxone to save somebody. So Pretty impressive number. Don't quote me on that number, but it kind of blew me away because they haven't been doing it long, and it already is helping people in the community, saving people. So, Medford Treatment Center. Sorry, I didn't have you in there.
You're fine.
Yeah.
No. Drywall and mud, I guess, is probably what we have going on. So, I'll do it the good councilman here, commissioner, helped us out because we had some permitting issues and those got moved along quickly here. And I also want to introduce Kyle. He's been working with us in Grants Pass for a couple of years, and been talking to him. He's going to come down and help us run the facility here in Medford. So everybody else ties in the community, and we're just kind of excited. And you'll start seeing him at other meetings around.
Nice. Great. Welcome. And not to put you on the spot, Kristen, but Oasis would be next alphabetically since you're here. So.
Gosh, I don't know. But I'm excited to be part of the
On track, Alan?
I don't know what was reported on last time, if Alan was present or not. We're just continuing to keep our hours extended and make times available for clients to have walk-in assessments as needed. We're continuing to move forward with our CARP renovation, hopefully coming up soon. All is well, moving forward.
Great. Sarah, Oregon Pain Guidance Work Group?
Yeah, so we continue to bring people together like HIV Alliance, Max's Mission, Greater Oregon Behavioral Health Initiative, VA pharmacist, CCO pharmacist, On Track, ARC. So it's a way to share information and share successes and needs. I'll mention that Medford Police have used naloxone to rescue someone 99 times since January of 2015. So in a way sad, but in a way beautiful that is going on. There have been, I think 31 uses in the last 9 months, which is way higher than their average. So we thank them for doing that for sure. Oregon Health Authority, the woman who coordinates the STR-SOR grant funding said she's gotten 45,000 naloxone kits out, 3,300 reported reversals. So this is anecdotal, but it's people coming back to Syringe Exchange and saying that a save has been done. And she'll give us a more in-depth update next time. So Jackson Care Connect pharmacists reported that they had 90 paid claims for naloxone in January, which is like more than double the average amount. So there's a lot going on.
John, Babe, Phoenix Counseling.
Hey, not a lot has changed since last time I talked. I just wanted to highlight one thing. I shared with the group last time that we had just rolled out a 2-day walk-in assessment, and that is going wonderfully, and we're actually hoping to add to it because we're starting to see a lot of folks. So, going well.
Great. All right, and Stephanie, Recovery Cafe. Or Brandon, Recovery Cafe? Who am I throwing in
I'm elected.
that corner?
I'm just going to talk about Boulder.
Okay.
So we are up to 9 circles. We just implemented 2 more. So those have about 8 to 10 people assigned to them, and they meet every week. We also have hosted expungement clinics in the last month, 3 of them. And then on Saturday, we'll be hosting Finding Your Worth, a class for women. It's a 3-hour event that we're putting on. And then we have yoga, recovery yoga, every Monday. On the Reclaiming Lives side, Brandon is doing peer support for us, and he and I have met with a number of people in the last month, quite a few actually. We have a really good referral mechanism between Recovery Cafe and Reclaiming Lives, where when people are falling back or they need more support, we engage with them, set an hour meeting, look at their natural supports and what resources we can put in place with them, and do a lot of encouraging, and then follow up and just really try to circle around them to keep them clean and sober. So it's been really awesome to partner with him. I jokingly call him my twin. It's become very popular with people. We just have very similar hearts and super different backgrounds, but resource development's probably, resources is my thing, and I have a lot of compassion and love, but Brandon just brings every time so much that I can't provide to someone, so I'm so lucky to have him, and it's been an awesome, coworker partnership. Really love it. You're welcome.
Is she amazing?
Well, with that, Boulder?
So we're still like right here with Jackson County, but we are venturing. I guess we literally just got a contract with Alaska. So I just went up there and trained some peer coaches in Alaska. Still on the fence about what's going on in Medford, but we are working on a contract in Eugene as well. So as this telemedicine begins, we're just trying to take over the top of the Pacific Northwest, I guess. That's exactly what it looks like for me. And yeah, like it's nonstop, so it's a beautiful thing going on. Providing in the rural areas where people can't be reached, and it's kind of remarkable, the turnout.
Great. It's good to hear. Darren, Jackson Care Connect?
Thanks for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. I think we're just busily kind of implementing our new contract with the state. As with regard to the subject matter of this group, I mean, I think we're really excited with our partnerships with several of the providers in the room and rolling out our MAT capacity grant funding. Getting those going so be on the lookout for some of that work to be starting here pretty soon. Trying to remove barriers for our membership and getting access to things like medications for addiction and working with our partners in kind of access redesign, as Lori mentioned, and MTM Consulting, and working in partnership with them to help kind of front-end access to removing barriers to that and reducing wait times for people to get assessed. So.
And Jeffrey, updates from home care?
Know about updates. I mean, at a care coordination level, we're certainly aware that there's continues to be a steep uptick in SUD presentations at the emergency department, and just been really impressed and grateful for the coordination work with ARC and On Track and Grants Pass Treatment Center. You know, I get alerts when people show up at the ED, and I can reach out to you guys, and you respond immediately in that perfect window of time. And so we've just had a lot of success stories around that. So I've just really appreciated that. But the presentations continue. It's staggering to see.
Is it mainly one substance, or?
Not really. I mean, alcohol certainly leads that charge, but methamphetamines and opioids are right there. But it's cool. I mean, and Darren, much the same. I mean, very quickly I can find out who is where. I can go through claims to find out where they're being seen, when they were last seen. I can reach out. All this happens within a half-hour period of time, and your folks can meet them at whatever hospital they're at. And it's been working really well.
All right. Yes.
I don't know if this is the right forum, and you can tell me so if not, but if it's not, if something can come from here, great. If not, if someone can help me spearhead. But I just have to share an experience. I came out of group, a 3-hour group on Monday with a beautiful group of clients, beautiful people trying to patch their lives back together and stuff, and just spent time with support, empathy and stuff. And I went and had lunch at a restaurant, and I unfortunately had to sit and listen to 2 people from the community that were very much stuck in the old way of thinking of these are just degenerate people and losers, and whether they were talking about both substance use and mental health issues and stuff, and it was devastating to me. So I just thought with our group here, if there's some way, some avenue, money, something to where we can help raise more awareness of the beautiful people that we're trying to serve in this valley. I don't know, it's on my heart, so again, I don't know if this is the right forum.
I think this is a good forum for that in terms of starting that conversation, what that would look like. So, absolutely, I think we could put that as something we want to address, you know, in terms of perceptions and,
I think
sharing that message.
If it's our community, you know,
Yeah.
is coming together in any way possible that we can, because it was difficult to listen to.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. No, thank you, John, for sharing that. Yeah, Jack.
Well, I think we're going to get the email address on the paper. And also, could we put on the Eventbrite link also?
Yes, we will send that out.
Helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
going to make that.
I need you there. That'd be
I was
great.
born BC before computers.
Well, we'll definitely send out that information. So just a roadmap for where we're going to go in our next couple meetings. In March, Dr. Reginald Richardson will be here from the office, the Oregon Alcohol and Drug Planning Committee, to talk about the state efforts around that. So we're feeling very fortunate that he's willing to be here to share that information. And then Sarah and I get together with Stacy to talk about potential agenda items down the road. So if you have any, please let us know. But we were talking about how we'd like to really turn the floor over to our local outpatient providers to give kind of an update on their strategic plan, vision, the things they're addressing, things they're building, and really have that be something that we focus on for April, May, and maybe even into June, depending on how much time people need. So we were initially looking at our outpatient providers to do that. But if there's somebody else that you feel would like to do that, we'd certainly want to make time for that. Or if you think it's a terrible idea, please let us know and we'll figure out a new agenda item. But I think it would be really informative and helpful because one of the best things I get from this group is just a deeper understanding for the network of services that are out there. So those are the pieces. Well, we will send out a robust email with invitations and we will look to meet in March. So thank you all for your time today and we're adjourned.